on The Young and the Restless. Hi, Genoa City fans. We're tracking a massive wave of personal drama, high-stakes corporate schemes, and dangerous secret hunting across town tonight. We'll lead tonight with Mariah Copeland, who is officially preparing to leave the psychiatric facility and adjust to life outside treatment. Supported closely by Sharon Newman through this difficult emotional transition, Mariah returns home only to face immediate tension and renewed conflict with Devon Winters. Devon reacts with intense anger and growing resentment over Mariah's release, allowing his volatile emotions to spill into his personal life. This ongoing turmoil is putting extreme strain on his marriage to Abby Winters, as Abby becomes caught in Devon's emotional storm and his anger risks pushing her completely away. Meanwhile, Nick Newman is facing an intense internal crisis. Struggling under mounting emotional pressure, lingering stress over Matt Clark, and constant anxiety over Nikki Newman's ongoing challenges adapting to her vision loss, Nick is facing increasing temptation and risks suffering a dangerous relapse. Speaking of Matt Clark, he is currently weighing Philly's summer's job offer as he decides whether to run away or build a future in Genoa City. While Philly's pushes hard for a real future together and continues investing in their romantic bond, Matt faces growing hostility from the Newmans if he chooses to follow his heart. Over at Chancellor, a massive corporate storm is brewing. Billy Abbott uncovers major secret that Jill Abbott had been keeping hidden, a truth that unintentionally sets Billy down a dangerous, obsessed path to reclaim Chancellor. Launching a risky new scheme, Billy's bold moves create massive fallout for Kane Ashby. As Kane works to counter Billy's plans, he finds comfort in Lily Winters. Dealing with the chaos together, Kane and Lily strengthen their emotional connection, moving toward deeper romantic tension as the corporate pressure increases. On the investigation front, the Abbott family is closing in on Dr. Laurent Markham. Jack Abbott, Diane Abbott, and Tracy Abbott are actively hunting for Markham's hideout, suspected to be his summer house, to eliminate the threat for good. Tracy takes an active role, hoping a personal meeting with Martin Laurent will yield the exact location needed to stage a final confrontation and ambush. Meanwhile, Patty Williams continues to be a dangerous wild card from behind bars. Patty may assist Kyle Abbott in his ongoing revenge plot against Victor Newman. Even as Kyle plots against Victor, he is simultaneously growing much closer to Victoria Newman, with the two sharing undeniable emotional chemistry and moving toward an unexpected romance. What if predictions? What happens next? What if Devon's anger drives Abby away for good? If Devon cannot control his resentment toward Mariah, Abby might seek comfort in someone else, completely shattering their marriage. What if Kyle's romance with Victoria is exposed to Victor? If Victor discovers Kyle is romancing his daughter while secretly plotting his downfall with Patty Williams, Victor's retaliation could destroy Kyle completely. What if Nick suffers a relapse? If the pressure pushes Nick over the edge, it could derail the entire Newman family's unity, just as they need to stand strong for Nikki. We want to hear from you. Is Devon being completely unfair to Mariah, or do you understand where his anger is coming from? Will Billy's latest obsession with Chancellor end in triumph or complete self-destruction? Are you buying the unexpected romantic chemistry between Kyle and Victoria? Drop your thoughts, theories, and reactions in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please don't forget to like, share, comment, and hit that subscribe button to stay completely caught up on all the latest Genoa City spoilers and updates. See you next time. Jack Abbott got stabbed by Patty Williams, and as of the most recent episodes I've got, his condition is critical, his future genuinely uncertain. I want to open with that plain way, no dressing it up, because this isn't a storyline I'm describing from some archival distance the way I have with a few other characters in the series. This is happening right now, in current episodes, to one of the single most established leading men in the entire history of the show. Jack Abbott has survived corporate wars, family betrayals, decades of Victor Newman trying to destroy him in every conceivable way, and right now, as of July 2026, we genuinely don't know if he survives this. Let's get into the actor first, because Peter Borgman's own story adds real weight to why this current crisis matters as much as it does. He was born Peter Michael Bergman on June 11, 1953, and here's a detail I did not expect to find in a soap actor's biography. His birthplace is listed as Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. I don't have further context on the specific circumstances of that birth, whether it was tied to military family service or something else entirely, so I won't speculate beyond confirming that's the documented birthplace. It's a genuinely unusual starting point for a career that would eventually make him one of the most recognizable faces in American daytime television. Before Jack Abbott, Bergman built a substantial earlier soap career playing Cliff Warner on All My Children from 1979 to 1989, a full decade on that role alone, which already established him as a major daytime presence before he ever set foot in Genoa City. He joined The Young and the Restless as Jack Abbott, and that move gave the show one of its most durable leading men, a character who's now been played continuously by the same actor for well over 3 decades. I want to underline that continuity specifically, because it puts Bergman in genuinely rare company, even among the legacy actors we've covered in this series. This isn't someone who left and came back on a recurring basis, the way we've discussed with several other performers. This is over 35 years of uninterrupted portrayal of the same man. On awards, he's a 3-time Daytime Emmy winner for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series with wins in 1991, 1992, and 2001. I want to point out the shape of that pattern specifically because back-to-back wins in 1991 and 1992 tell you the character found real, immediate traction very early in Burton's tenure. And then a third win nearly a decade later, in 2001, tells you the performance kept earning fresh recognition well after the character had become an established fixture rather than a new arrival. That's a genuinely strong trophy case. And combined with over 3 decades in the same role, it places him among the most respected veteran actors currently working in daytime. Personal life, the material I've got here focuses mostly on his health and professional status rather than detailed private life updates. And I want to respect that boundary rather than stretch the material. The confirmed point worth flagging is that he recently dealt with an eye-related medical issue and has since returned to work. Beyond that, there's no verified net worth figure in what I've got, consistent with this entire series, so I won't invent one. Now, here's where I want to spend real time because there are actually 2 separate significant news threads running simultaneously right now, and I think it's worth untangling them clearly before we get into the character analysis. The first thread is about Burton himself, the actor, and his own recent health situation. Reporting indicates he dealt with a detached retina requiring emergency surgery, which explains a prior break he took from the show. I want to be careful here to keep this distinct from anything happening to the character, because these are 2 separate stories that have gotten discussed alongside each other in recent coverage, and I don't want to blur them. Burton had a real, serious personal medical event requiring actual emergency surgery, and it pulled him away from the show for a period. The reporting I've got indicates he's since returned to work, which is obviously the outcome anyone would hope for. An actor recovering from a legitimate medical emergency and to back to the job. The second thread is the current active storyline, Jack Abbott being stabbed by a character named Patty Williams in the aftermath of what's described as a tense rescue scheme involving Diane and Kyle. I want to fly clearly that I don't have the full mechanics of exactly what that rescue scheme entailed, what Diane and Kyle were actually doing, or precisely how the confrontation with Patty escalated to a stabbing. So I'm not going to reconstruct scene-by-scene details I don't actually have in front of me. What is clear and clearly current is the outcome. Jack's been stabbed, his life is described as hanging in the balance, and this is being covered as one of the show's biggest current Abbott family emergencies, with his condition still described as critical and his future uncertain as of the most recent July 2026 episodes I've got information on. I think it's worth being honest about something here. These 2 threads, the actor's real health scare and the character's current fictional crisis, are entirely separate situations that happen to be getting discussed in some of the same coverage, likely because journalists covering this story are naturally drawing a connection between the actor who plays Jack recently had a serious health scare, and the character Jack is now in a life-threatening situation. I want to make sure that connection stays clearly labeled as coincidental overlap in press coverage, rather than implying any actual link between Bergman's real recovery and the current in-story stabbing plot, because conflating those 2 things would be a genuine disservice to both the real person and the actual current storyline. All right, let's get into Jack Abbott the character, because I think understanding who he's been across decades is essential to understanding why this current crisis actually carries real weight rather than just being another disposable soap cliffhanger. Jack's full fictional name carries some interesting complexity, referenced as John Abbott or Jack Abbott depending on context, which connects him directly to his own father's name, John Abbott SR, someone we've touched on before in the series when discussing Ashley and Tracy Abbott. Since he's their sibling, he first appeared in 1980, which puts his character history nearly as long as the show's own broadcast history. Though Bergman himself has played the role since 1989 specifically. His occupation and story centers on being a Jabot Cosmetics executive, the Abbott family patriarch, and a longtime power player in Genoa City's business world. His personality, as established across decades, is intelligent, driven, competitive, protective, wounded, romantic, and often self-critical. I want to sit on that combination for a second, because it's genuinely more layered than a simple corporate patriarch descriptor would suggest. He's not written purely as a boardroom tactician the way Victor Newman often is. He's also written as someone capable of real emotional vulnerability, someone whose competitive instincts and his romantic failures and his family loyalty all sit in genuine tension with each other rather than being cleanly separated storylines. As the eldest Abbott's son, he's functioned for decades as both the family strategist and its emotional center, particularly whenever the Abbott siblings are in conflict with each other. I think that dual function is actually the key to understanding why he's remained so central for this long. He's not just the guy running the company, he's the person the rest of the family, Ashley, Billy, Tracy, all of whom we've discussed individually in this series, turns to when things fall apart, even when he himself is the one whose judgment or emotional choices caused part of the mess in the first place. His family ties run through John Abbott and Dina Clear's throat, Margarine, as parents and directly to Ashley, Billy and Tracy as siblings, meaning we've now covered essentially the entire core Abbott sibling group across this podcast series. And Jack sits right at the center of that family structure as the eldest. His romantic history is extensive and genuinely significant to the show's overall storytelling, including major relationships with Diane Jenkins, Phyllis Summers, and Nikki Newman, among others. I want to flag that Diane specifically is directly relevant to the current crisis since she's referenced as part of the rescue scheme that led to the stabbing, so that romantic history isn't just background biography, it's actively feeding into what's happening on screen right now. His character arc across the decades follows what's genuinely one of the classic Y&R transformation patterns from ambitious young son to corporate kingpin to the emotionally complicated patriarch he is today. Over the years, he's battled Victor Newman repeatedly, fought for control of Jabot more times than I could count with confidence, survived numerous romantic betrayals, and repeatedly tried, with mixed success, to protect his family from itself. What I think is genuinely well constructed about this character, based on everything I've got, is that he's never been written as purely the good Abbott in contrast to Billy's chaos or purely the smart businessman in contrast to more impulsive characters around him. He's both of those things simultaneously, and he frequently fails at both in ways that read as genuinely human rather than a simple plot mechanics. Now, the current 2026 storyline takes that established pattern and pushes it to a genuine extreme. The material's clear that this crisis emerges specifically while Jack's trying to save Diane and manage the delusions of a character named Patty Williams. I want to be honest that I don't have full psychological or narrative detail on Patty's specific delusions or what exactly triggered this particular escalation into violence, so I'm not going to invent the internal logic of her character's current mental state. What's clear is the outcome and the framing. This reads as a high-stakes culmination of old rivalries and unfinished emotional business rather than a random, disconnected act of violence, and the coverage suggests that if Jack survives, which is genuinely still an open question as of the most recent episodes, the fallout is likely to reshape his marriage, his family leadership, and the ongoing feud history that's defined so much of his character across decades. I think that's worth sitting with for a second, because it tells you the storyline isn't being treated as a quick, disposable cliffhanger, designed purely to generate a week or two of tension before a tidy resolution. The framing around potential fallout, marriage, family, leadership, feud history, suggests the show's positioning this as a genuinely structural moment for the character, one with consequences that could ripple outward regardless of whether Jack actually survives the stabbing itself. His in-universe power, which matters a great deal for understanding what's actually at stake here, comes from the Abbott name, Jabot's legacy, and his long-standing status as one of Genoa City's sharpest business minds. Even when he loses a specific battle, and he's lost plenty over the decades, he remains genuinely influential because he understands the family, the company, and the city's entire power structure better than almost anyone else on the canvas. That blend of real competence alongside real, ongoing vulnerability is exactly why he stayed central for this long. And it's exactly why current threat to his actual survival carries more weight than it might for a less foundational character. On wealth, no precise, verifiable net worth for Jack and what I've got, so I won't invent one. The fair description is Abbott wealthy with major assets tied to Jabot and broader family holdings without a specific dollar figure attached, consistent with how we've handled every other character's finances across this entire series. Let me get into the actual analysis now, because I think this current moment for Jack Abbott raises a genuinely different question than most of what we've covered on this podcast, precisely because it's an active, unresolved crisis rather than a settled piece of character history I can analyze with the benefit of hindsight. Here's what I find genuinely significant about where this stands right now. Discussed across the series, characters whose survival is essentially guaranteed by structural necessity. Steffi Forrester's too central to the show's wiring to actually be at risk. Sheila Carter's built around an entire mythology of being unkillable. Jack occupies a different, more uncertain position. He's certainly foundational to this show, arguably as foundational as anyone we've covered in this entire series, given how long he's been the same actor playing the same character. But foundational and guaranteed to survive aren't actually the same thing, and I think it's honest to say I genuinely don't know, based on what I've got, whether the show intends for this crisis to actually kill him, or whether this is being built as a survival story with permanent consequences attached rather than a death. I want to flag that uncertainty clearly rather than assume either outcome with full confidence. On one hand, a character this central, played by the same actor for over 3 decades with 3 Emmy wins behind him, represents an enormous amount of accumulated narrative and audience investment that a show would be genuinely cautious about spending on a permanent death. On the other hand, we've discussed in this series how shows sometimes use exactly that kind of accumulated weight specifically because it makes the threat land harder. The more established and beloved a character is, the more genuine shock value there is in actually following through on killing them, precisely because audiences assume, the way I'm reasoning through it right now, that a character this foundational must be safe. I don't think I can tell you with confidence which instinct is actually driving the writer's room right now, and I'd rather be honest about that than pretend I've got insider knowledge of where the story line's actually headed. What I do think is worth naming is how this current crisis functions as a genuine culmination of everything that's made Jack work as a character for this long. It's not an isolated, out-of-nowhere threat. The material's explicit that this emerges directly from his efforts to protect Diane, tying directly into his extensive romantic history with her, and it involves Patty Williams, a character whose presence in the storyline connects to longer-running threads I don't have full detail on, but which clearly carry real history on this show. That's exactly the kind of layered, consequence-driven crisis that fits a character whose entire appeal has always been the tension between his competence and his vulnerability, between his role as family strategist and his repeated pattern of romantic entanglement leading to real danger. I also want to point out something about the timing here that I think is worth naming honestly. This storyline is unfolding at almost the exact same moment Real reporting has been discussing Bergman's own recent health scare and return to work. I want to be careful again, not to conflate those two separate things, but I do think it's worth acknowledging that there's something genuinely poignant, whether intentional or purely coincidental, about an actor returning from a real medical emergency right into a storyline where his character's own survival is placed in serious doubt. I don't have any material suggesting the show deliberately built this storyline around Bergman's own health situation, and I want to be clear I'm not implying that connection exists in any official capacity. It very well may simply be that these two stories are landing close together in the news cycle by coincidence, but the emotional resonance of an actor's real recovery running parallel to his character's fictional crisis is hard not to notice, even while keeping the two clearly separate in terms of actual causation. Here's my honest verdict, and I want to be careful about how I frame this given that the actual outcome is still unresolved as of what I've got in front of me. Peter Bergman has built one of the most genuinely rare careers in daytime television, 3 daytime Emmy wins across more than 3 decades in a single role. Following a substantial earlier run on All My Children, which places him among the most respected and consistently recognized veteran performers this genre has ever produced. That's not in question regardless of how the current storyline resolves. Jack Abbott, as a character, has represented one of the most successfully sustained both things at once figures in this entire series. A man who's never been reducible to purely hero or purely flawed businessman, and that duality is exactly what makes the current crisis land with real weight, rather than reading as a cheap, manufactured cliffhanger. My actual, honest read on where this needs to go, given the genuine